What if everything you were taught about ancient gods was a lie? Not a harmless mistake, but a carefully maintained illusion. What if Ra didn't rise from myth, but from another star system? What if Thoth wasn't a god, but a being with technology so advanced it looked like magic? And what if Osiris didn't rule the underworld, but came from above it? For centuries, we've looked at ancient Egypt with a mix of awe and confusion. How did they build the pyramids with laser-like precision? Why do their texts speak so casually about beings descending from the skies? And why does the evidence, buried in walls, texts, and tombs, look less like legend and more like a report? The question no one wants to answer is echoing louder than ever. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? This isn't just speculation. It's a trail of clues, facts, and anomalies that demand a second look. And in this video, we're going to follow that trail, step by step, through the eyes of the ancients themselves. Because if you've ever felt that there's more to our history than what they told us in school, you're absolutely right. Why did ancient Egyptian priests and scribes insist their gods came from the stars? That's not just poetic symbolism. It might be a hidden truth most people overlook. In temple walls and ancient scrolls, there are stories that don't just hint at divinity, but at beings descending from the sky in radiant boats, bringing knowledge, power, and a language no man had ever heard. Picture this. You're a farmer in 3000 BC, and a glowing being lands from the heavens speaking in tones that vibrate your very bones. Wouldn't you call that a god too? Take Ra, for instance, the sun god. The myths say he traveled the skies daily in his golden bark, illuminating the earth below. But what if this wasn't metaphor? What if Ra's boat was actually a flying craft? Technology mistaken for divinity. Ancient texts describe his departure and return with a precision that feels eerily systematic, almost scheduled. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? That question keeps echoing louder as we trace these celestial breadcrumbs. Now think about Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and science. He's said to have given humanity language, mathematics, astronomy, essentially civilization itself. But why does every myth tie him to the moon and stars, describing him as glowing and bird-like? Some carvings even show him holding devices that resemble modern tools. It's as if he was more engineer than spirit. Could Thoth have been an extraterrestrial emissary, tasked with jump-starting human progress? Osiris, the god of resurrection, takes this mystery even deeper. Myths claim he descended from the stars, ruled as a just king, died, and was reborn, bringing eternal life to humans. The symbolism, sure, it's rich. But what if his death and resurrection were the result of alien biotechnology or interstellar regeneration? The idea that, were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials, begins to feel less like a conspiracy and more like a misunderstood truth lost in myth. Ancient Egyptians weren't vague. Their texts and monuments are loaded with detail, not the kind of stuff you make up around a fire. They recorded these beings arriving in light, ascending in flames, speaking in otherworldly tones. And for them, these weren't just legends. They were real accounts woven into religion, culture, and law. They believed, unquestionably, that the gods walked among them. And maybe they did, but not in the way we've been told. Let's entertain a thought. If a spaceship landed in your backyard today, and a glowing figure emerged offering cosmic wisdom, would your descendants call it alien or divine? That same line of thought may explain how the Egyptians saw their gods. They didn't just worship, they documented, they painted, they engraved. Maybe they weren't trying to create myth, but preserve a memory, etched in stone. And as we continue to explore their records, one thing becomes clear. The next layer of this story takes us deep into their writings and monuments, where even more shocking details wait in plain sight. If ancient Egyptian texts were written today, would we classify them as religious scripture or as historical documentation of extraterrestrial contact? That's the real question. From the Temple of Edfu to the pyramid texts, we find line after line describing luminous beings descending from the heavens. Not metaphorically, but literally. They didn't say the gods were like stars. They said they came from them. Could we be reading cosmic testimony through the wrong lens? One striking example is the Zep Tepi era, translated as the first time. Egyptian records speak of it as a golden age, when divine beings ruled the land and brought with them technology, order, and civilization. These weren't invisible spirits. They had form, identity, and purpose. And they didn't just appear, they arrived. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? The way these texts describe events, it sure sounds like a contact log from an ancient control tower. Let's talk about the Heliopolitan Ennead, a group of 9 gods led by Atum, Ra, and Shu. Their origin stories repeatedly involve journeys from above and through the sky. These were not just metaphors for spiritual transcendence, they imply travel, movement, location. And if we reframe these divine descents as landings, everything shifts. It's like reading sci-fi wrapped in sacred ink. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what it is. Even in the coffin texts, burial writings reserved for the elite, we find phrases like, "the sky doors opened," and "the gods came down in glory." That's oddly specific, isn't it? If they were purely symbolic, why use such visual, technical descriptions? Ancient people weren't naive. They described what they saw, and what they saw may have been something that defied all earthly explanation. Some passages even mention flashing lights, burning wheels, and voices from the clouds. Sounds familiar? Today, we'd call that a UFO sighting. But in 2200 BC, what frame of reference did they have? The only language available to them was myth and divinity. So they used it, but the experiences behind those words, could they have been alien? The deeper we dig, the louder the question gets. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? Imagine trying to describe a smartphone to someone from the Stone Age. You'd probably say it glows, it speaks, it shows visions, it's magical. Now reverse that scenario. If beings from another planet landed in ancient Egypt with advanced tech, wouldn't their presence be seen the same way? That context reshapes every scroll, every glyph, every sacred word. And it leads us right to Egypt's most enduring mystery. How did they build the pyramids with such cosmic precision? What if I told you that the Great Pyramid of Giza isn't just a tomb? It's a blueprint encoded with secrets that even modern science struggles to explain. Think about this. It's aligned with true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. Not bad for something built over 4,000 years ago, right? But how did they manage that? Without satellites, GPS, or laser levels? Unless, of course, they had help from beings who'd already mastered the stars. Which raises the chilling question once more. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? The pyramid's dimensions are no less bizarre. Its base perimeter divided by its height equals 2p, yes, pi, the same mathematical constant that forms the basis of circles. Coincidence? Or a signal? The proportions also encode Earth's curvature, solar distances, and even the speed of light, values we only confirmed in the last few centuries. So how did the ancients know? Or rather, who told them? Theories that once seemed wild now sound like warnings we never decoded. And then there's the construction itself. We're talking about over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing tons, stacked to perfection. No mortar, no cranes, no errors. Engineers today still debate how it was done. Even with modern tech, replicating the Great Pyramid is nearly impossible. So we have to ask, were the Egyptians building on knowledge passed down from the stars? Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? Because if they weren't, then we're left with an even stranger idea, that humans once had advanced tech, then forgot it completely. Let's not forget the pyramid's location. It's placed at the geographic center of Earth's landmass. That's not poetic, it's measurable. You can plug it into Google Earth and see for yourself. Out of all the places on the planet, they built it there, and aligned it to the stars, especially Orion's belt, a constellation associated with Osiris, the god of the dead. Why would a civilization obsessed with the afterlife also be obsessed with space, unless they believed the two were connected in ways we still don't understand? Even inside the pyramids, there are features that make zero sense, like the air shafts that align perfectly with star systems. These aren't for ventilation. They're too narrow and angled with too much precision. They were designed with intent, maybe to guide the soul, or maybe something else entirely. If Osiris and Ra returned to the stars after death, could these shafts have been channels for communication? Or worse, portals? That would change everything we thought we knew about ancient spirituality. Mainstream historians chalk it up to symbolic architecture, but after all the cosmic math, precise star alignments, and impossible engineering, symbolism feels like an excuse. The pyramids may be many things: monuments, tombs, temples, but above all, they are messages, and whoever built them wanted us to look up, not down. Because maybe, just maybe, they never left. And that brings us to a symbol that has haunted humanity for centuries: the Eye of Horus. At first glance, the Eye of Horus seems like just a mystical symbol, something spiritual, ancient, maybe decorative. But what if it was never meant to be symbolic at all? What if it's a diagram? Some neurologists have compared it to a cross-section of the human brain, matching the thalamus, corpus callosum, and even the pineal gland. Coincidence? Or was this the ancient way of preserving advanced anatomical knowledge, gifted by those who knew our inner design? Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? The pineal gland, in particular, is often called the third eye, associated with higher consciousness, spiritual insight, and even interdimensional awareness. Ancient cultures revered it, but the Egyptians, they drew it with astonishing precision. Could it be that they weren't just talking about seeing with divine wisdom, but literally using a form of alien tech that activated the mind in ways we've only begun to imagine? Maybe this wasn't metaphor. Maybe it was memory. Then there's the strange objects held by gods in carvings: staffs, ankhs, and strange globes that resemble energy conductors or handheld devices. Some of them look eerily similar to modern-day Tesla coils or biometric scanners. Why would a god need a tool? Unless they weren't gods at all, but engineers, scientists, explorers from another world. These symbols might not be spiritual at all. They might be technical schematics left behind by cosmic visitors. One temple relief shows a figure holding what looks like a long bulb connected to a power source, dubbed the Dendera light. Scholars say it's just a lotus flower, but lotus flowers don't have cables, coils, and insulators. And if it really was just a plant, why is it tucked away in a dark, inner chamber, far from public view? Maybe it wasn't meant for ceremony, but function. Again, we're forced to ask, were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? Even the Ankh, often seen as a symbol of life, has a curious design: a loop on top with a cross-shaped handle. Some believe it was a key, others a battery. What if it was both? A device that transferred energy or knowledge? Think of it like a USB drive from another era, capable of storing divine frequency or genetic codes. Absurd? Maybe. But when the absurd keeps lining up with ancient precision, we have to start questioning what we thought we knew. Symbols aren't just images, they're compressed knowledge. And when a civilization like Egypt repeats them over centuries, carving them into stone, painting them on sarcophagi, and burying them with royalty, they're not just being decorative, they're preserving something. Maybe the Eye of Horus wasn't to look at, but to look through. And maybe what it's pointing to is far beyond anything human eyes were meant to see. Which brings us to something even stranger: objects in the sky. Ancient Egypt didn't just worship the sun, they watched it. But sometimes, what they saw in the sky wasn't just a glowing ball of light. It moved differently, changed directions, and hovered in silence. In several ancient texts, especially from the time of Thutmose III, there are references to fiery disks and circles of fire that flew across the sky in formation. This isn't poetic, it's observational. One account even says these disks shone brighter than the sun. That sure doesn't sound like birds or clouds. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? The Tully Papyrus is one of the most intriguing records. Although its authenticity has been debated, the document describes a mass sighting of many disks of fire in the sky, seen by the Pharaoh's army and scribes. They reportedly buzzed in the air, emitted a foul odor, and then vanished into the heavens. How do you explain that using ancient metaphors? You don't. Because even today this sounds like a textbook UFO encounter. And it happened over 3,000 years ago. Wall carvings in temples like Abydos and Dendera show objects that resemble helicopters, submarines, and aircraft. Skeptics say it's overlapping hieroglyphs, but if that's the case, why do the outlines so clearly resemble modern tech? It's almost like an ancient artist was trying to freeze in time something they saw. Could these depictions be stylized attempts to record alien ships that once hovered above Egypt's skies? The question isn't so crazy when you ask, were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? Let's not forget how often gods were depicted descending from the sky in discs of light, or traveling across the heavens in boats of flame. We've always assumed that meant the sun or stars, but what if these were just the only words they had to describe spacecraft? Imagine a flying saucer seen through the eyes of a Bronze Age farmer. Wouldn't you call it a divine sunboat? Their language wasn't lacking. Our interpretation is, some hieroglyphs even depict wingless flying objects emitting beams of light. And in a culture where every symbol had deep meaning, why invent such a thing out of nowhere? If it didn't serve a purpose in their mythos, why carve it into sacred stone? Unless it was real. Unless they weren't imagining these flying discs, but interacting with them. That's a terrifying and thrilling thought. And it makes us look at Egypt's rulers in a whole new light. Because if these UFOs were real, and if the gods arrived through them, then it's time we revisit another ancient belief, that the pharaohs were more than human. And maybe they were. What if the pharaohs weren't just chosen by the gods, but created by them? Egyptian texts often mention the pharaohs as sons of the gods, born from divine seed, carrying sacred blood. That's not just a fancy way of saying important. That's biological language. And if we take it literally, it opens a door few dare to walk through. Were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? And were the rulers of Egypt their hybrid descendants? Take Akhenaten, for example. His body was unusual. Elongated skull, thin limbs, wide hips, features that puzzled historians and scientists alike. Some say it was a genetic disorder. Others whisper a more forbidden theory. He was a hybrid. His artwork shows him in poses and shapes no other pharaoh dared imitate. Why? Maybe because he wasn't like them. Maybe he was showing the truth, that he was something different, something not entirely human. This idea isn't limited to Akhenaten. The entire royal bloodline was obsessed with purity. Incest, divine rituals, and star-based myths surrounded their births and reigns. Why this fixation on preserving the blood? Was it simply tradition? Or was there something inside them that had to be maintained? If their bloodline came from the stars, then interbreeding wasn't just political. It was genetic protection, like keeping a cosmic signature intact. Again, we ask, were the Egyptian gods actually extraterrestrials? Even the process of mummification starts to make more sense through this lens. It wasn't just about preserving the body. It was about preserving something inside the body. Some texts even suggest that resurrection wasn't symbolic, but literal. That one day these preserved vessels could be reactivated. With what? With what kind of technology? That's the question no one wants to ask, because the answer might be buried in both flesh and stone. The Book of the Dead describes the journey of the soul through the stars, naming specific constellations, gates, and guards the spirit must pass. Sounds less like poetry and more like a space travel manual written in code. If the pharaohs were part extraterrestrial, it would explain why so much of their spiritual system was focused upward, not toward heaven, but toward home. And maybe their rituals were never meant for Earth at all. Even their crowns and headdresses, like the tall, oddly shaped ones worn by Nefertiti and others, might not be ceremonial at all. Some researchers believe they were used to hide elongated skulls or head implants. Others think they were symbolic representations of their true form, honoring their off-world origins. Either way, the obsession with celestial identity was never just spiritual. It was deeply physical. And now, with all this in mind, we're ready to ask the question that started it all, in a whole new way. So, what if the gods of Egypt weren't gods at all? What if they were visitors, guides from beyond the stars, who shaped not just pyramids and rituals, but the very roots of civilization itself? If that's true, then our entire understanding of history needs to be rewritten. But here's the real question. What else have we misunderstood? What secrets are still buried beneath the sand, locked in stone, or hidden in plain sight? And more importantly, what does that mean for us? Are we truly alone in the universe? Or are we part of a much older, deeper and stranger story than we've ever imagined? If this knowledge stirred something in you, if you're starting to question, to wonder, to look up instead of just looking back, then you're already on the path. Leave a comment below. Do you believe the Egyptian gods were actually extraterrestrials? Which part of this story blew your mind the most? And if you want to keep uncovering forbidden truths, ancient secrets, and cosmic connections that challenge everything you thought you knew, Subscribe to Ancient Chronicles and turn on notifications. There's so much more coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next.